Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Sam Pittman, the Arkansas Razorbacks, heading into the 2024 college football season with a lot of doubters across the country. And I want to take a look at some of the biggest storylines for this Arkansas program heading into fall camp, kicking off this afternoon. And I don't think enough people appreciate the kind of offseason moves Arkansas made in terms of not only the transfer portal additions, where I think they clearly get better at some positions that they needed to get better at. But I think more importantly, the changes at the coordinators, most specifically the offensive coordinator spot. You look at last year, I don't know if you saw a worse offensive coordinator, not only in the SEC, but at the Power 5 level with Dan Enos. I think moving to Bobby Petrino heading into 2024 is also a massive storyline that, not enough people are talking about with this Arkansas program. Fired up to get into this one. Before we do it, as always, just want to say thank you to the Arkansas fans, whether we're doing our breakout players, top 10 players. You guys have shown a ton of support to the boys. We can't thank you guys enough. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And much more importantly, would love to hear some of your biggest storylines for this Arkansas program over the next couple of weeks of fall camp. And without further ado, let's get into this one. I want to start with, kind of what we led with, and that is Bobby Petrino taking over this Arkansas offense. And I think what's so exciting about Bobby Petrino coming in is not only, I just think unequivocally, this is a massive upgrade in terms of what Arkansas had in 2023. I think he got an ideal quarterback to kind of do what Bobby Petrino wants. And you look at what makes Bobby Petrino really one of the better offensive coordinators and offensive play callers that we see in college football. He knows how to scheme around his personnel. And you have a guy like Taylen Green that, yeah, sure, we have some question marks about the consistency that Taylen Green will play with going back to his days at Boise State. But I think what's so exciting about Taylen Green is there are some big-time physical traits in skill sets, I should say, that Taylen Green brings to that quarterback position, most notably his athleticism. And so how does Bobby Petrino lean into what Taylen Green does well? And how can you consistently put Taylen Green in positions and spots where he can use his skill set and kind of be as comfortable as possible within this Arkansas offense? You look at Taylen Green, one, big body, has a big arm. Again, consistency pushing the ball down the field has been the question mark. Can Bobby Petrino put him in comfortable spots where he can just do a little less thinking and more going out and playing football? That's kind of the best version of Taylen Green. And obviously, you got to talk about the athleticism that Taylen Green has as well, where it's a little bit of a different kind of athleticism than KJ Jefferson. It was kind of just a Mack truck in terms of running the football, being an athlete. You look at Taylen Green, there's much more twitchiness to his game. There's much more speed to his game. There's a lot more athleticism in terms of what he can do in space. He's a guy that KJ Jefferson would probably just run over a lot of back seven defenders when he's trying to make it happen with his legs. Taylen Green can outrun a lot of defenders that are still going to be trying to tackle him. Keep in mind, Taylen Green's still 6'6", 225 pounds. He's a big body to bring to the ground. Taylen Green excels when he's outside of the pocket using his athleticism. It gets a little bit easier for him to diagnose what defenses are trying to do. Can Bobby Petrino kind of consistently put him in those situations? I think that's a massive storyline for this Arkansas team. And I think what's so fun about Taylen Green is he has the upside to win you some football games in the SEC. I think the number 2 storyline for this Arkansas program, arguably the biggest storyline outside of Bobby Petrino and Taylen Green, is the offensive line development. I mean, you brought in Sam Pittman to be one of the more dominant programs in the SEC along the line of scrimmage. And when Arkansas has had a lot of success under Sam Pittman, that's exactly what you got. You go back to 2023, one of the big bugaboos for this Arkansas program was an offensive line that not only struggled immensely in pass protection, giving up sacks on 13.5% of dropbacks, they also really struggled to run the football. Now, you look at Arkansas heading into the 2024 season, not only significant changes in terms of the coaching staff on the offensive line. It sounds like Sam Pittman is going to be much more hands-on with this Arkansas offensive line unit. I think they bring in a little bit more depth through the transfer portal. I think it's headlined by left tackle Fernando Carmona, who was one of the more coveted left tackles that we saw in the transfer portal. And we all know how difficult it is to get starting caliber tackles in the transfer portal. I think Arkansas kind of found a bona fide stud at the left tackle spot. You look at the right tackle spot with Keyshawn Blackstock, a little bit more question marks around Keyshawn Blackstock, but at least you're kind of getting some depth. The guy that was formerly the number one JUCO product, played at Michigan State last year. You feel better about the tackle position, but more importantly, the competitive depth. I feel like Arkansas last year, because of the lack of depth and the injuries that they had, they were kind of forced to just roll with what they had on the offensive line, playing multiple guys out of position. You look at a guy like Pat Kudus, who was, probably not ready to play as a second-year kid, but more importantly, just not really an SEC tackle. Now you get to kick him inside where he's inevitably going to be a little bit more comfortable. You're bringing Addison Nichols from Tennessee, a guy that we have a lot of confidence in, can come and be a really good center. And then Joshua Brown, one of the better interior offensive linemen in the SEC. Two things to be optimistic about the Arkansas offensive line. One, I think the personnel is better. But number two, Sam Pittman's going to have a bigger role. They obviously made some changes in terms of the offensive line coach. There's kind of some reasons to believe this offensive line takes a big step from 2023. That's a big storyline. Arkansas fans know more than anybody else that it's really hard to run a good offense when you have some liabilities on the offensive line. I don't see that being the case for Arkansas in 2024. Number three, would offensive playmakers step up? You look back at last year, yes, Andrew Armstrong was awesome for Arkansas. After Andrew Armstrong, there wasn't a ton of different playmakers that you had a ton of confidence in, right? Isaac Tesla played some solid football. He was your next leading receiver with 350. What kind of makes me ask this question, you look at the number 3 leading receiver for Arkansas, it was true freshman tight end Luke Haas, who only played in 5 football games and was a true freshman at the tight end spot. Now, I love Luke Haas. I've been very vocal. I think he can be one of the better tight ends that we see in this conference in 2024. That being said, I think having your number 3 leading receiver as a true freshman tight end who only played 5 football games, that kind of highlights that, outside of Andrew Armstrong, there wasn't that many difference makers on the offensive side of the football. And a lot of the guys they were kind of rocking with in 2023 were year one SEC players. Now, so I at least think that there's some reason to believe that a guy like Tyrone Broden or a guy like Isaac Tesla or a young cat like Isaiah Satanga can kind of take that step going into 2024, whether it's just another year within this Arkansas program, whether it's another year of development physically, or just getting a little bit more used to SEC football in guys like Tyrone Broden and Isaac Tesla's case. And I think you have a really good tight end room with guys like Luke Haas and Vicarious Gums. Can we just get a little bit more dynamic in terms of the playmakers on the offensive side of the football? I think Bobby Petrino certainly will help that. A lot of these guys can operate really well with the football in their hands. One thing Bobby Petrino does well, getting the football to your playmakers in space. That's going to inevitably help these Arkansas playmakers on the offensive side of the football. Now, going over to the defensive side of the football, the one thing that I'm kind of looking for in defense, and I think you have less question marks about Arkansas's defense. I look at the defensive line and say, not only do you have some NFL talent, guys like Landon Jackson, I think you're really deep. You're kind of rolling 2-3 deep pretty much at every position on the defensive line, whether it's at the edge spot, whether it's on the inside. You feel good about the defensive line. I think the more fascinating story for Arkansas during fall camp is what players kind of break out and assert themselves as difference makers on the Arkansas defensive side of the football. That's kind of what you figure out during fall camp and what players are consistently putting it together every single practice, right? The Bullets get a little bit more live than what they were in spring. You're practicing pretty much every day. That's when players really show who they're going to be during the college football season. I'm going to look at the linebacker room first. One, Xavier Sora Jr., I feel like a lot of people just kind of assume he was a guy that didn't really play for Georgia, played almost 200 snaps last year, started the conference championship game against Alabama. I think, Xavier Sora Jr. can play. I think he had to transfer from Georgia because let's just face it, Georgia's linebacker room is the best we see in the country. It was going to be hard for him to consistently get on the football field. That doesn't mean that he can't be a very good linebacker for Arkansas in 2024. We saw a very similar conversation with Drew Sanders a couple of years ago, transferring from Alabama because he couldn't get on the football field, emerges as one of the better defenders in the SEC with Arkansas. Can Xavier Sora be that kind of guy? I think you can use him in a lot of different ways. He's a former 5-star prospect that has a lot of physical juice. And I think right next to him, I'm looking at Brad Spence going into his second year. Thought he looked phenomenal in the spring game. Another big physical but athletic linebacker that you can have come off the edge. You can have him in some blitz packages. You can get creative in terms of how you use both Brad Spence and Xavier Sora Jr. I think on paper, you lose guys like Chris Paul and Jaheim Thomas, guys that led this Arkansas team in tackles last year. Those guys were solid linebackers. I'm not going to take shots at Chris Paul Jr. or Jaheim Thomas. That being said, were they difference makers at the linebacker position for Arkansas? Probably not. I felt like they stuffed the stat sheet a little bit more than they were being difference makers. I think you have the ability to be a little bit more impactful at the linebacker position. The next guy I'm going to take a look at here, Jaheim Singletary at the cornerback spot. Again, former 5-star prospect coming over from Georgia last year. Played a little bit for Arkansas last year. Can he put it together going into year 3? We know from a physical trait standpoint, this kid has all the juice. We know we have a true cornerback one and Jalen Braxton on the one side. Can we get a really high upside cornerback to step up on the other side? I think Jaheim Singletary really could be that guy. I think Tevis Metcalf's a guy that's getting a lot of buzz coming in as a freshman as well. And I think the last freshman I want to talk about is Charlie Collins. Not a guy that is going to start for Arkansas year 1, but we all know how important depth is along the defensive line. We feel like they're pretty deep on the defensive line, but we're kind of looking for guys that really can emerge as difference makers coming off the edge outside of Landon Jackson. You bring in Anton Jukaj, who I think is a fascinating prospect that I didn't think had the impact that I kind of expected him to have during spring ball. Maybe he puts it together during fall camp, but Charlie Collins, a former, I guess, a top 100 national prospect coming out of high school, a guy that I really liked in terms of getting for Arkansas in the 2024 class. Can he be a guy that plays early for Arkansas? I think this Arkansas defense has a lot of young talent that can really emerge during fall camp. That's kind of what I'm looking for this Arkansas program. A lot of fun storylines for this program during fall camp. We'll obviously talk a lot about this program. Would love to hear some storylines from you guys in the comment section. Again, appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.